Hey there, welcome back to my kitchen. It's that time of year where the leaves are turning colors and the weather is getting cooler, so that means it is time to share some fall recipes. In today's video, we're going to make 3 very comforting and cozy fall dinner ideas along with a sweet treat at the end. So I hope you enjoy today's recipes, but let's go ahead and get started and I'll show you how to make them. First up today, we're going to make a stuffed spaghetti squash. You will need to preheat your oven to 400 degrees, and then to begin you'll just need to take a fork and pierce your spaghetti squash all over, and then you're going to add it into the microwave for about 5 minutes until it's soft enough to cut all the way through like this. Once it's split into 2 separate pieces, then you can take a spoon and scoop out that interior part with all of the seeds. After the insides have been removed, then you're going to take some spray oil and just spray those all over. To season these, I'm just going to sprinkle them pretty decently with some salt, pepper, and some of my favorite all-purpose seasoning. Then you'll just transfer these over to a parchment paper lined baking sheet and make sure to flip them upside down. Then these will go into the oven and bake for right around 40 to 45 minutes until they can be easily pierced with a fork and shred very easily as well. Now you can go ahead and steam up some broccoli. So I'm only going to use half of this since my husband isn't a big fan of broccoli, but if you love broccoli then go ahead and use the whole thing. I'm also going to go ahead and start up about half a pound of Italian sausage. Into the sausage I'm adding about half of a yellow onion that I chopped up pretty fine. And then I'm just going to let these two cook in here together until the sausage is cooked all the way through. Be sure to drain off any grease that is in the pan and then add in about 1 to 2 teaspoons of minced garlic. Let the garlic cook for about 30 seconds to a minute until you can smell it nice and strong. At this point, the broccoli should be done, so I'm going to go ahead and add that into my sausage. If you want to, you can chop it up a little bit smaller, but to me that really didn't matter that much. Here is the spaghetti squash coming out of the oven. As you can see, it has browned up quite a bit, and now it should be very easy to take your fork and shred all of that spaghetti squash inside. After shredding it up, I'm then going to add about a tablespoon of butter in there and just kind of mix that in and give it a minute to melt down. Then I'm going to add half of my mixture of sausage and broccoli in there. The other half, of course, will go to the other half of spaghetti squash. Then over the top, you're just going to top it with some cheese. I'm using a sharp cheddar, but you can use any type of cheddar or any other type of cheese that you like. I went ahead and repeated what I just did to the other side of the squash, and then these went back in the oven for about 5 minutes, just long enough to let the cheese melt. Here's what my bowl looked like in the end. I do like to add a little bit of sour cream on there, and after this I actually added some red pepper flakes just for a little bit of heat. If you want to, you could actually use a spicy sausage, but I did not have that this time. Overall, this is a very simple recipe. All of the ingredients are pretty minimal, which I really enjoy. Next up, this meal was absolutely delicious. We are making some chicken and dumplings. To begin, we're going to go ahead and add 1 whole chicken. I did go ahead and clean that and remove the insides from it and added it into a nice big pot. Then you're just going to take some water and completely cover that chicken up. I'd say I used probably about 4 cups or so. Then I'm taking some chicken, better than bouillon, and I'm going to add 3 to 4 teaspoons of that in there. This is just really going to help flavor the chicken itself, but also really enhance the broth. Add the lid onto your pot and let this boil in here for about an hour to an hour and 20-30 minutes until the chicken is cooked all the way through in the thickest parts. Very carefully, you will transfer that chicken over into a separate bowl. You can leave the broth in the pan, just let it sit there for right now with the burner off. Now, since this chicken is still pretty hot, I'm going to go ahead and take my fork and just remove all the skin off of the chicken. And once the skin is removed, then you can go ahead and start taking off all of the chicken, and you should just be left with the bones. Now technically you don't need to use this entire chicken in here. I'm only going to use about 3/4 of it and then go ahead and freeze the rest of the chicken for a different meal. Before moving forward with the recipe, I am just going to come over here to the broth and skim through this to make sure there are no bigger gritty pieces or any small pieces of bone floating around in there. You can go ahead and add your chicken back in at this point and then turn the burner back on as well and let that go ahead and come to a boil. Now to begin on the dumplings, I'm first going to add 1 cup of all-purpose flour into this bowl with 1 teaspoon of salt. Then I'm taking 2 tablespoons of butter. This is a salted butter, but unsalted will work fine as well. I'm going to cube this up into smaller pieces and then add it into the bowl. Using my fork, I'm just going to kind of cut that butter into the flour until it's looking something like this. Next, you'll add in a 1/2 cup of hot water along with another 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour plus 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. Since this water is really hot, I'm going to go ahead and use my fork to begin mixing this together, and then once it's starting to come together, I will go ahead and get in there with my hands. I'm going to divide this into 2 equal portions and then let them sit in this bowl for about 10 to 15 minutes. After they've rested for a few minutes, we're going to go ahead and come over here to a floured countertop and start rolling out this dough. You want to get this dough pretty thin. You want it to actually end up being kind of about the thickness of a pie crust. So I'm just going to take a pizza cutter and cut these into strips and then cut them down the center again. If you want to make them a little bit smaller, you can do that, or even square shaped, but this is how I prefer to do it. My father-in-law actually makes really good chicken and dumplings, but he does fluffy dumplings, which I think I do prefer those after making these ones. Now coming back over here to my pot of broth, it should be boiling at this point. Now you can slowly start dropping in your dumplings, but you want to drop them in 1 at a time. Doing it 1 at a time will make them less likely to stick together when they first hit the broth. I'm also going to be adding in 2 tablespoons of butter. Then just give this a light stir to make sure none of the dumplings are sticking together. Now using my spoon, I'm going to go ahead and get some of this broth out of here and add it into 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. Using the broth, we're going to make a cornstarch slurry, and this is going to help thicken everything up. Once you get that all mixed together, you'll pour it right back into the pot, give the contents of the pot another good stir, and you're just going to let this simmer to cook the dumplings and let all the broth thicken up. Now you can leave it as is if you want to, but I actually wanted mine to be a little bit thicker, so I did 2 more tablespoons of cornstarch and a little bit more broth in there, and then gave this a few more minutes to continue thickening up. Once everything is thickening up, you can go ahead and give it a taste and see if you need to add any salt and pepper. I usually add pepper at this point and just a little bit more salt. Here is what my bowl looked like in the end, and let me tell you, this turned out absolutely delicious. I will definitely make this again. Like I said earlier, my father-in-law makes some really good fluffy dumplings, which I think we do prefer, but these dumplings were really good as well. They just reminded me more of a noodle. To go along with this, underneath of the chicken and dumplings, I actually made some mashed potatoes as well, and we like to serve ours over top of the mashed potatoes. Fall is here, so that means it's time to make my yearly pumpkin chili. And I'll be honest with you, you're either going to love this recipe or you're going to hate it. To begin here, I'm going to go ahead and chop up half of a yellow onion, half of a green bell pepper, and half of a red bell pepper. Then I'm just going to chop up 3 cloves of garlic. Now to make the seasonings, you're going to need 1 tablespoon of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of cumin, 1 teaspoon of oregano, half a teaspoon of cayenne, half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of pepper, and 1 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. Give that a little mix together and then just set it aside for right now. Now moving over to the pot on my stove, I'm going to go ahead and add 1 pound of lean ground beef in here along with the peppers and onion that we chopped up. These are all going to cook in here together until the ground beef is cooked all the way through. If needed, go ahead and drain off any grease from the ground beef and then add in your minced garlic. This minced garlic is going to cook in here for about a minute or so until you can smell it nice and strong. Now you can go ahead and add in your seasonings and a half cup of beef broth. Give this a good stir together to make sure that the seasonings are all throughout and to make sure that the garlic is not burning on the bottom. Next, you'll add in 1 can of diced tomatoes with green chilies, 1 can of mixed chili beans, and 1 can of pure pumpkin. Then you'll add in 1½ teaspoons of tomato paste along with 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. If you don't like your chili to be super sweet, you can start with 1 tablespoon and decide whether or not you want to add the second. Then give this a really good mix together to combine everything. Now you can eat this just like this if you want to, but I really love to add some creaminess to this, so I'm going to add in a half block of room temperature cream cheese. I'll go ahead and stir that in and let this simmer for about a half an hour. Even if you are not adding in the cream cheese, let this simmer for about a half an hour and let all those flavors really come together. Give this a taste, adjust your seasonings if needed, and then this is ready to go. Here's what my bowl looked like in the end. I love to top mine with a little bit of mild cheddar and just a dollop of sour cream. Like I said earlier, this recipe is not going to be for everyone. You may love it, you may hate it. It does have a pumpkin-y flavor, so if you're not a big pumpkin fan, then of course you're probably not going to like this. I personally love pumpkin in sweet dishes and savory dishes, so of course I love this. But I do have to tell you, this chili is much better on day 2. Now, of course, we have to include a sweet treat in this video, so now we're going to make these pumpkin snickerdoodle cookies. You will need to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Then over to my mixer, I'm adding in 1 cup of butter. This is 2 room temperature sticks of unsalted butter. Before adding in anything else, I'm just going to kind of whip that butter together a little bit in the bottom of the bowl. Next, I'm adding a half cup of canned pumpkin. Make sure you're using pure pumpkin and not the pumpkin pie mix. 1 cup of sugar, a half cup of brown sugar, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, 1 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice, half a teaspoon of cinnamon, half a teaspoon of salt, and 1½ teaspoons of baking powder. Then just give this a quick mix to combine the butter and all of the other ingredients. You'll stop the mixer one more time and add in your egg and then mix it once again. After the egg is incorporated, then you're going to start adding your flour. For this recipe, you're going to need about 2 2/3 cup of all-purpose flour, and I'm slowly going to add that in here until all the flour is combined with the mix. Now that everything is all mixed in, we're going to go ahead and put this in the refrigerator to chill for at least an hour. This is a step you do not want to skip. If you do skip this step, your cookies will not turn out right. While that is chilling in the fridge, I'm going to go ahead and prepare my sugar coating. So in this bowl, I have a 1/2 cup of sugar, a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and a 1/2 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. I'm just going to get this all mixed together and set it aside until we're ready to use it. After allowing the dough to chill in the fridge, then you can go ahead and start rolling them into balls. I'd say this is about golf ball size, maybe just a little bit smaller, but after you roll them up, you're then going to roll them in that sugar mixture. After the sugar, you can go ahead and place it on a parchment lined baking sheet, making sure to spread them out pretty decently. You want to try to have about 2 to 2.5 inches between each one. I went ahead and baked these for right around 10 minutes. The baking time may change a little bit with your oven, just keep an eye on them. You want to see the outside looking a little bit darker along the edges, and they should be pretty fluffy at this point. I went ahead and let them sit on the baking tray for 5 more minutes before removing them over to this cooling rack, but this is what they should look like when they are all done. These cookies are really good. They're not overly sweet, and they do have a very subtle pumpkin flavor, which I really enjoyed. I like to keep my cookies a little crispy around the edges and still very soft in the center, and these turned out perfect. Thank you so very much for watching today's video. I do hope that you enjoyed, and if you did make it all the way to the end, don't forget to leave me a flower down in the comments below to let me know that you did, and I hope to see you back here on Sunday with a new video. Bye!